We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. We're getting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road when the snow's clear. We're into a very special time. It is a Festivus for the rest of us here. We'll get the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I will not have Raven scratch-offs. This is the last one I have. I'm going to have the Magic 8 Ball. We'll look into the Magic 8 Ball here momentarily and find out whether the Ravens are going to be winning the World Series, or excuse me, the Super Bowl, as well as maybe even if Terrell Suggs is going to the Hall of Fame in a couple of weeks. This is the time of year when we play these huge games, Pittsburgh versus Baltimore, where I don't bother my sort of legendary writer friends who vote for Hall of Fame stuff too much. Only like when the Baltimore Colts and the San Diego Chargers get together do I bother friends of mine like Clark Judge, who's going to hold up his Johnny Unitas. What is that? That's your statue, or what is that? Like a flat? What is that,
No,
Clark?
it's a photograph that's made into it, and then I've got this thing that I used to have on my wall as a kid. All right.
Dude,
Yeah. Yeah, and then
I'm so nostalgic. This is my Earl Campbell. I got this on the internet. It's my throwback. I show it
oh,
off. It's got,
like
like,
it. I like it.
isn't this, it's warm because it's cold out right now. The NFL gives, doesn't it, Clark? Don't we? We love this league, even though it is
On
given and taken from us at various points in
on the
time.
wall.
Tom, Maddie, holy cow. Have you read the book yet?
I have
Joel
it.
Poiley. Okay, Joel Poiley comes on. He's down in Tampa.
Yeah,
He
I've got it.
befriended.
I've got the book.
Yeah, I mean, what a wonderful story. So, how are you? How is life outside of New Haven, Connecticut, off of the NFL beat after a lifetime, 40 years back, and you're married into the league. You've done it all. You covered the San Diego Superchargers. I picked this up on the internet. Is there anything better than that belt buckle?
No,
1971,
no,
Clark.
no.
So I've
Yeah.
been collecting weird NFL stuff because I don't spend money on my PSLs or tickets or flying off to Buffalo next week. This is a big game, right? And nobody thinks the Steelers can win, right?
Yeah, right, right. That's a big game just because it's Baltimore Pittsburgh. When Baltimore's Pittsburgh, I don't care what the records are. I just look at them and go, it's going to be a great game no matter what. Now, the Ravens are going in a different direction than the Steelers. The Steelers are descending. The Raiders are Ravens are accelerating, and that's why I like the Ravens in this game. I think Lamar Jackson's got some notions to dispel. Let's say, I mean, he's 2-4 in the playoffs. People wonder about him in big games. It's a big game. I mean, because it's Baltimore Pittsburgh. If it's a regular season game, it's a big game. It's Baltimore Pittsburgh, and it's the best rivalry out there. So I look at it because I'm going to watch it, not because I think that the decision or issues in doubt, because I don't. I think the Ravens will win. I think they'll win by more than 10 points. But I just love to watch the Ravens and Steelers play because it's always a good game, a competitive game. But I think Baltimore's just got too many weapons. And as I said, Pittsburgh's descending, so is the quarterback, Russell Wilson. Every year it seems like, Nestor, that Russell Wilson does this every year. In fact, I was trying to look it up and find out what was going on each year. He starts fast and he ends up crawling to the finish line. I think he's taken so many hits over his career. I think that probably has something to do with it. But they're running on empty right now. I'd be shocked if they were able to win this game. I like Baltimore in it, but I just want to watch it because it's Baltimore Pittsburgh. I'll watch them every time they play.
For those of you watching, I am wearing a legendary jersey. Clark Judge decides who's legends and who's not. If you don't know who Clark is, you can look him up on the internet. He literally is a judge and jury when it comes to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I grew up reading you. You were worshipped by all the editors on our sports section by the
No,
time you going
no.
out to San Diego and ran around with Stan Humphries and Bobby Ross and a whole bunch of
Yeah.
others, but as well as Steve Young and covering the 40. So you've done all of that. Bring folks up to speed because I want to go soup to nuts because you and I always meander into Burt Jones. I've already
Yeah.
goofed
Yeah.
on church. Like
Yeah.
I got business I got to get. Not even Todd Rundgren. Like we got things we got to get to. First things first. People come to me every day and say he's a Hall of Famer, she's a Hall of Famer, they're a Hall of Famer. Put this bird that we're going to put Tracy Chapman in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before you put Sticks in. What's wrong with you people? So but you're legitimate. And when I talk about Hall of Fames, whether it was the late, great Phil Jackman, who we've buried since the last time I've spoken with you, who used
Well,
to vote on.
no.
Yeah, we lost Phil. We lost Phil back in the fall. We lost his wife Tina more recently than that.
Oh,
We've lost them
I
both
knew.
in the last 90 days. It's been a bloodletting here for some of my parents, like literally. Don't make me cry. So Jackman, when I was a boy, we would go down to those Caps games. Man, he had been in the baseball writers forever, Earl Weaver, all of that. And he and I had real conversations when I'm 16, 17 years old, not just with him, with Stedman, with people who did this. It was always taken seriously. You know how badly when I was a younger
Yeah.
guy I wanted to be the Baltimore representative. I pity you guys that have done this over the course of time, even though it's a hell of a charge. Give everybody out there the elevator speech on not Suggs, Yanda, Steve Smith. We'll get to that in a minute. But how long you've been doing this and what this entails in order for you to decree whether you're going to vote for Suggs, Yanda, or Steve Smith.
Yeah, I've been doing it. This is my 15th year of doing it, but certainly have a history with the NFL just because I've been covering it over 40 years, but I've been watching it a lot longer than that. Been watching since I was a kid. I watched Unitas play. He was the guy that I first watched. I watched the 58 championship game on black and white TV. I was a kid then, but I fell in love with the Colts then. It was easy to fall in love with the Colts. But I've been doing it 15 years. I've got people on there have been doing it longer. They're allies of mine. We all feel very strongly about history being respected and being recognized. And there's somewhat of a recency bias going on now, just because we have some younger voters who, Burt Jones, never heard of him. Who is he? Unitas, I heard he was great. Look at his passer rating. I don't
Yeah, it was
want to.
Darren Woodson, like put him
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
Put
yeah,
him in.
and so, but there's some people like that,
Yeah.
and so you feel as if you've got a pretty good feel of it, especially since I left mainstream media and started working on my own with some others on websites like the Pro Football talks about some things, issues going on, who's got a Hall of Famer and everything. I said, well, I'll tell you what, we can tell you because we have people who are in that room, and we did a website called the Talk of Fame Network, and you and I have talked about that before because you've had Rick Osson, I think, and Ron Borges probably on the show. They're voters, and they've been on there a long time. So they joined with me, and then we broke it up because someone had a real personal setback in his life, and so I started again with Talk of Fame 2 with Ira Kaufman, who's also a Hall of Fame voter. He's been doing it a long time from
See,
Tampa,
and these are people that
who
I've
are
known
respected.
for
They're
30 years,
respected.
all
Yeah,
of them, who I would say, if you vote for them, I vote for,
yeah, right,
like, leave me. Do I feel like I saw Joe Namath and Burt Jones play in the 70s, and like all of that. I've covered
right.
27 Super Bowls. I'm qualified, but it's tough work. How many are there 50 of you now? Like
They're
about that many?
50, but I think it's down to 49 only because two left. And I know the ones replaced him. And I asked somebody last night, are we 50 or are we 49? I said 49. I said, I haven't seen anything to say that we're anything more than anything less than 50. So 50 or 49, one of the two. But there are a lot in there. And when I mentioned Rick Ossom, for instance, he's a guy who's been there, I think, close to 30 years. And those are people that really respect history. And that's what I like about that board. And I like it more than what baseball is doing, even though I'm not a baseball writer, I love it. In fact, it's baseball, my favorite sport. But even though I'm not involved in that process, because we're all together and we can see each other and we can look at each other and say, I think this, I think that.
There really
And
is a debate. There's a
it's a
room.
debate, and there's a debate. And
The
so
Baseball
what we
Hall of Fame is an online debate and a
that's
battle.
right.
And
That's
it can
right.
be secret for forever, right? It could
That's
have been,
correct.
right?
And,
Yeah.
and so we look at each other and now we're doing it online, virtually for I think that's the fourth or fifth straight year.
Oh,
I'm
dude, I used to run into you and Peter King and Gross y'all running out at the Marriott to get
yeah, sure.
coffee.
Oh,
I
sure. No,
mean,
that's
it
right.
was dude, the stress level that I saw from all of you, because I would do Radio Row and you would come by and I'd say, you're putting John Ogden in, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
and you would then you go to the next table, you're putting Orlando Pace in, right?
right,
Then you go to the next table, you're putting Tony Baselli in, right?
right.
Like the Art Monk thing got I mean,
Hey,
there have been
ugly.
a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah.
cases that were just ugly,
Harry
right?
Carson. Harry Carson, the same thing. Paul Tagliabue, same
Oh,
thing.
whoa, Art
Uh,
Modell.
Art. Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah, I know.
In any case, we always met the day before the Super Bowl, as you know, on that Saturday, and it was a long, involved
But
process.
you don't do it that way anymore. No.
COVID changed everything.
Okay. I
COVID
didn't know
changed
this.
everything.
Thanks for talking
So
to me
we
about
did it.
this.
We met virtually, and then last year we were going to meet in person because Jim Porter, who's the president of the Hall of Fame, thinks very strongly there are all sorts of advantages to meeting personally. So do I. I think it's great. And then as it turns out, like the day before, there was a big snowfall. And on the East Coast, we were going to meet in Atlanta. People couldn't make their reservations. Other people said, I can't get there. And he said, forget it, it's off. So this year I said, we're meeting in Atlanta. He said, no, we're not. We're going to go back to virtual just because last year was difficult with the weather. We just don't know whether we can do this or not. So we're going to do it virtually. So we're going to meet virtually sometime in this month, middle of this month. I know the date. I'm not supposed to tell, right? So, but anyway, we do that online, and it's 49 or 50 guys there, and each candidate has someone who presents them, and then afterwards you have a discussion. So it's pro and con, and then we vote afterwards. It would take too long to go into all the machinations, but there are people in that room that you will know who respect the history of the game and know it. And hopefully I'm one of those guys just because I've been around long. Now, some people say you're dinosaurs like Gosling, Borges, me, Howard, as you mentioned, Balzer, but people have been around for a long time, but they know the lay of the land and they know that you kind of, Nestor, I would ask you, if you looked at a baseball player, I would say to you, tell me, can this guy play or not? You could probably tell me. You don't need to see stats. And I feel that's the way we are. You look at a guy like Burt Jones, you go, I don't need to see what his stats are.
Well,
United,
this is where like Marshall
them.
Yanda against
Yeah, I don't
Steve
need to know.
Smith, Steve Smith against Reggie Wayne, and then Terrell Suggs, who
Yeah,
he's first ballot Hall of Famer. He's first. I said, I don't know. I went through the list, and honestly, I don't like Terrell Suggs. I never liked Terrell Suggs. Terrell Suggs did some things personally to me that I found offensive on a regular basis, but on a personal basis. And Kevin Byrne, everybody knows this, like, the bleach incident that he had all of these things. And when I bring those up to voters, they're like, no, it's on the field. Okay, on the
yes,
field, I look through it. I would put him in the Hall of Fame over, I looked at these 15 names. I'm wondering, does Steve Smith have a chance? I think Yanda's a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's first ballot in your mind or in other minds. Where is your mind frame on these three players? You're the first one I've asked about in
oh,
this because people are asking me about it. It's been top of
yeah,
mind over the last 2
yeah.
weeks.
Well, the problem you've got is what you just mentioned, first ballot Hall of Famer. Can you define a first ballot Hall of Famer? How do you define it if you do? And I thought Ron Borges had the right description. First ballot Hall of Famer is a guy who stand up and say his name and sit down. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, sit down. Jim Brown, sit down. John Unitas. What we need a discussion here. You saw him play. Let's move on. Let's move. And we've done that. Trying to think. The last guy was probably Peyton Manning. Stood up, Peyton Manning, sit down. All
His
right.
brother, it won't be that easy.
Sorry.
His brother, it won't be that easy.
His
Eli.
brother is going to be the longest, most contentious conversation we've had in years, probably since
There
Tagliabue.
you go.
This
I
is going
knew
to
this
be
going in
this
because
is going to be emotional. It's going to be confrontational, and at some point they're going to say, "Enough. We can't do this." I mean, these meetings, by the way, and so we're putting in maybe we've changed the voting process. We're putting in hopefully 5 modern era guys, right? And then we've got 5 seniors, contributor, and coach. We have 1 coach, 1 contributor, and 3 seniors. In the past, we'd vote on all 5 of them. They've changed the rules this year. We vote on 3 of the 5 are going in. Hopefully, 3 of the 5. All 5 are not, but we vote on those. So at the maximum, you could have 8? You could have 8 guys, right? You could have 8 guys, 3 and 5, and so do the math. That's 5. Yeah, that's 8. So you could have 8 guys, but you could have as few as I think it's as few as 4. And that's again, let's not get into all this, but the thing that's interesting here is that when you talk about first ballot, it should be someone who just stands up and gets your attention. So who would you say in this group does that? And there's really not anyone. I think maybe Antonio Gates. I mean, I did cover him. He has more touchdowns than anyone there. I think it's
I put him
160 in
in.
his career.
He was in my
Yeah,
5.
you put him
Yeah.
in. But would you stand up and say Antonio Gates and sit down? No. I mean, he was up last year. He was not a first ballot guy. So what defines a first ballot candidate? And as I said, if you go by that definition of bronze, it's somebody stand up and say his name, then you can't really do that with anyone
That makes
here.
this more contentious because there's no rubber stamp on this
No.
class.
So if you say Steve Smith, I want to hear more about Steve Smith. Terrell, I want to hear more. Marshal Yanda. I mean, I'll bet some people in there know very little about him. So tell me about him. Offensive linemen are a little bit tough. Are they a little bit tough because there's not any sort of quantitative mark that you can not like most sacks, yards per carry, that touchdown passes a little bit more difficult. So and And answer to your question, all three of them, yeah, they're Hall of Fame worthy. Steve Smith is the third wide receiver. Well, we've got Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne who've been waiting there, I think at least 4 years, maybe five. And Holt was a top 10 guy last year. The first five go in. So the next five should be in the on deck circle, right? They're standing in line. It's like you're waiting in line at a theater in downtown Baltimore. So you're waiting in line. First five go in. The next five should go in, right? Unless someone can jump the queue. Who jumps the queue this year? Does Steve Smith? And I'd say no, he doesn't. Is it Marshal Yanda? No, there's somebody ahead of him, Willie Anderson, an offensive tackle for the Bengals, top 10 guy last year. He's been waiting years.
By the
And
way,
then
Marvin Lewis said to me when he came over here 20 years ago, like that's a Hall of Famer and we're still waiting, right? I
still waiting.
pointed
Yeah.
that out because I thought Willie Anderson was a Hall of Famer when he came here at the end of his career. Like I'm just like he's a Hall of Famer. He's not a Hall of Famer yet, and
But he's
those
a
are
right
words that were
tackle.
used 20 years ago.
He's a right tackle. To the best of my knowledge, the last right tackle we put in was Jackie Slater, and I think that was something like 2002. We're putting in left tackles, right? But Willie Anderson was a great right tackle. He'll get in, Nestor, and I think he should get in this year. I think, but then you go Terrell Suggs. Okay, he's got all the numbers, but you go Jared Allen's in the line. He was also a top 10 guy who's been waiting 5 years, and he was a two-time top 10 guy. He's ready to go in. So we're going to put in two pass rushers, not unless you have somebody who is a slam dunk. You get Deacon Jones in it, Bruce Smith. So I would say all three of those guys, in my mind, they're going to have to wait at least a year. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like someone says, you've heard this a long time. What do you call the guy who graduated last in his med school? Call him a doctor, right? I mean, it doesn't make a difference with your first ballot, last ballot. You're in. You're a Hall of Famer. So I would say I'm glad to see Smith in there. Honestly, I know this doesn't go over right with your audience. I'm a big Hines Ward fan. I think Hines Ward should be a finalist. I think Hines Ward should be in the Hall of Fame. He hasn't. He's been a 9-time semifinalist. What's wrong with Hines
I
Ward?
said that this morning because it's Pittsburgh week. I'll say that to Charlie Batch too. Hines Ward, he's not. He's off the ballot, like literally, right?
Don't ask me. He's
Insane,
nine
insane.
time semifinalist. Insane. It's right. But
I
so
mean, I
that's
like
why.
Reggie Wayne, and I think Torrey Holt's a Hall of Famer, but give me Hines Ward over those guys. Like to me, but Hines Ward,
I'm with you. I'm with you. And also, those were two number two receivers. They weren't. I mean, yeah, Marvin Harrison's gone in. Reggie Wayne playing with Marvin Harrison. Then Reggie Wayne was on his own. But they're two number two receivers, And then you've got Torrey Holt was playing with the greatest show on turf. Well, we've already put in Isaac Bruce. How many guys are we going to put in there? If you put him in, Nestor, if you put him in, and I do think he's going to go in. He was a top 10 guy last year, too. And it looks like now we're just going to get a wide receiver every year, right? Larry Fitzgerald comes up next year. Larry Fitzgerald's a guy who will jump the queue. He will jump the queue. So you get all these wide receivers, and you say, wait a second, you put Torrey Holt in, he would be the fifth starter on that St. Louis Rams greatest show on turf team to be enshrined. The fifth. Now, I covered the San Francisco 49ers. Tell me how many starters on the 1980s 49ers that won 4 Super Bowls, how many of them are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame offensively? Offensively.
two.
Because with St. Louis, it's 5 on offense. 2, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana. Except Jerry wasn't there for 2 of those 4. So you can tell me Joe Montana absolutely carried that offense? But Roger Craig's not in? But we're going to put Torrey Holt in? I have an issue with that because if you're putting 5 guys in there, they must be the greatest show on turf, except they weren't. They won 1 Super Bowl. So they must not have been the greatest. And so I sort of have an issue with that. And I know what the pushback is. You can't penalize the player. He put up all these numbers. Well, I understand that. But, I look at it and say, what did they do with it? I look at impact. They went to 2 Super Bowls and they won 1. Okay. 49ers went to 4. They won 4 in the 80s. And then they won the 5th in the 90s. So anyway, that's
Clark
it.
Judge is here. He is a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter and a true historian who is ready to argue anything NFL with true accuracy. Let's start with this for the game this week, the Pittsburgh, because I'm done with the Hall of Fame thing, even though I'm wearing an Earl Campbell jersey here. For me, with this rivalry and where the game is,
Yeah.
and I want to pat myself on the back because when I'm right, I like to do this. The last 2 years at the trading deadline, Luke and I fought on the air, and I even found some tweets and statuses of if they could get Derrick Henry, they would be unstoppable. I have literal quotes from a year and a half ago. I don't know if they're going to be unstoppable this week, next week, Buffalo, Kansas City, where the road is. And they're awful losses to the Browns and the Raiders that have been their tax.
Yeah,
Mike Tomlin
right.
said their tax to pay, their toll is they have to come to
Yeah,
Baltimore this week. The Ravens' toll is they're going to have to go to Buffalo and Kansas City and do this. They're built to do it for the first time and with this running game. And here's the thing I want to say to you, and if Art were here, he'd kick me right now, and he would kick you too for not getting him in.
I
Art
tried.
Modell, listen to me. If Art Modell came back right now, and I had 5 minutes with Art, or even with David, right, whom I loved, right, like just love those men. If I had 5 minutes on the phone, first I'm gonna get David Modell his favorite pizza at Mama Santa's in Cleveland, but I would say the Ravens have a running back and is only comparable, and I'm saying this to a Hall of Fame voter wearing an Earl Campbell jersey, is Jim Brown. The only comparable to Derrick Henry is Jim Brown. I haven't seen, not Eric Dickerson, the way he runs, the size of him, the lacrosse player at Syracuse and him. At this point in his career, it's not Adrian Peterson. It's not,
Yeah,
name
yeah.
anybody else. You tell me, am I wrong, Clark? Because I've been saying this for 2 years. He's now wearing he wore an Oiler jersey once or twice last year too. Which is a travesty. He's on a different place in a different space. And if they're going to win these games, yeah, Lamar's going to be great and there's going to be this and that and they're going to kick field goals and the defense is going to have, there's going to be moments if they're going to win a Super Bowl. But to me, this is going to be about them having Derrick Henry. And if they don't have
Yeah.
him next year, they're a
Yeah.
different team if they get off the bus without him because I've seen it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nestor, to a certain extent. I mean, I'm not sure about, the only one outside of him is Jim Brown. I mean, Eric Dickerson to me is somewhat of the same kind of runner, upright and could accelerate. Earl Campbell, strong between the tackles, but could accelerate. Same thing. Bo Jackson, if you played,
Eric
I
Dickerson
love.
didn't really run you over, though.
No,
Really?
but
Yeah.
right, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, is Derrick Henry a great play? There's another first ballot Hall of Famer.
Well,
He's
who's
going to
his
get.
comparable?
Yeah, yeah.
You've just put
So
him in the Hall of Fame, and they might lose Saturday night in the snow. But to
I'm not going to
me,
lose.
this is his chance
Yeah,
to shine.
but
This is his best chance to get the brass ring, literally.
yeah, and yeah, absolutely. But it's the Ravens' best chance too. Why? Why did they not go to the Super Bowl last year? For whatever reason, they decided they're going to be a passing team against Kansas City when they could have run them to death. I didn't never understood that. And so now you've got the opportunity to run opponents into submission. But you can throw the ball too because you've got a quarterback who can run, who can throw. But you don't need to prove to everyone that he's going to be a pocket quarterback in the championship game. No, you've got a guy now who can run them to death and beat them down and wear them down. Kansas City last year was vulnerable to the run, and so you tried to beat him with a pass. Made no sense. I never understood that strategy. It cost you. Now you've solved what could be the missing link. You've got one of the best running backs of all time. One of the best quarterbacks too, but one of the best running backs of all time, and you can beat them with the run or the pass. Now, if you want to decide to beat them with a pass again, guess what? You're probably going to lose. I mean, you need to do what suits you best, and what suits you best is to be a balanced team. They can hammer people. Jackson can beat you outside the tackles, and he can beat you with his arm. But if you're going to say, no, we're going to keep him in the pocket and try to beat Kansas City that way, no, it's not going to work. So I look at Baltimore now as when I cover the 49ers, the thing that they did was if they didn't get to the Super Bowl, they looked at what cost them, and then they identified that. And Baltimore did the same thing. What cost you in the AFC Championship game? Yeah, that fumble at the goal line, okay, but you didn't run them into submission. Let's get it back. You got the best back out there. Now you can do that. That's why I think they're the most dangerous team to beat Kansas City. I think they can beat them. I think they do. I mean, listen, came within Isaiah likely toe print or whatever over the line in the season opener to go into overtime. That they've got the weapons. They've got now just use them. And you've got the guy to do it. I agree with you. That's why I think as you and I talked early in the year, I think we were talking about Lamar versus Derrick Henry MVP. And I said, I'm split on that only because if you have two MVPs on the team, how can you have one league MVP? You got two who are invaluable. You've got two invaluable players on that team. And to me, Henry is almost as important as Lamar, only because of what he's able to do with teams that can't defend the run. And I know the quarterback's the most important position. He touches the ball every play. but Derrick Henry changes everything. You can't suddenly go, we're going to rush four guys and keep drop everyone else into coverage. You could do that against Brady. Sometimes they'd run three at them, sometimes four. But remember when Rex ran three at him? You can't do that against these guys because Derrick Henry will get going. And once he gets past that first line, he's unblockable, untackable, whatever. I mean, you can't get him because he's accelerating. So he's what they didn't have. And you were right when you said get him because if you get him, you got a ticket to New Orleans. And I think I think they can do it this year. And I'm not looking at Saturday. I'm looking at the long haul. You know, to beat Buffalo, that'll be tough. I mean, going up there, Josh Allen is having a great season, but Josh Allen doesn't have the weapons that Lamar does. Now, my question would be to you, what's Zay Flowers' situation? I don't even know what that is.
Well, and the weather situation too. And this team is built to just go run if it needs to. And the Steelers are built to sort of stop that. So that's concerning. The Ravens take care of business, especially against
Yeah.
teams that don't know them well. If they were to get to a Super Bowl, I said they'd be a 10-point favorite over the Lions or over
Oh,
the
sure.
Vikings or like
But Ne
they
Nestor, you know who their biggest problem is? The biggest problem for the Ravens is the Ravens. I mean, they make so many stupid penalties. I mean, they hurt themselves. If they could get over that,
can they
um,
do that for a month?
that's a good
Can they
question.
spend the next month not getting into penalty jail, not exposing the kicker, not having the secondary being confused? And they've just been deft at identifying good football players and
Yeah.
Kyle Hamilton. And this thing that they've done, and I've talked to Luke at length about this. By the way, if you're tuning in on the radio, Clark Judge, longtime NFL historian, is here, Hall of Fame voter, and all that good stuff. The the in-season move. We go back to 12 years ago when they won the Super Bowl with Flacco. They fired their offensive coordinator in the middle of December and made Jim Caldwell the play caller, and Joe Flacco was planking, and they lost an awful game to the Denver Broncos, and they were all but buried in the mile. I mean, there were so many moments where it could have been awful. This thing, they lost to the Eagles 4 weeks ago, and it wasn't good. And the kicker's head was iced, and the defense wasn't going well. Very susceptible. All the mistakes on the offensive line. They weren't running the ball as well as they wanted to because the offensive line, and it's all changed. This narrative has changed in the last month. The narrative for the Steelers, they've gone into the toilet through all of this. But the amazing part has been this defensive ability to take this really special, you mentioned Hall of Fame with you, Kyle Hamilton, a couple of years into building whatever that career is. Yeah, drop back and just quarterback the defense. We just won't lose after we do that. And that's happened. They've been very deft at what they've done, including bringing in Dean Pease to help
Yeah.
Zach Orr, because their best inside linebackers playing for the Steelers this week, right? And Patrick Queen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I that's the other thing is their defense has become much more salient. I think over the last month or so, they've really become a defense that you can rely on. I think down the stretch, whereas early in the season, I went, boy, the secondary is suspicious, and I don't know if they can protect any lead. Well, they can now, and so the defense is playing better. They're playing with confidence. I look at teams that accelerate into the playoffs. That is one of those teams. And you look at the talent, you go, that makes them dangerous. Then you've got Lamar Jackson. Whoa, Derrick Henry. Oh my God. You know, Andrews, you got Zay Flowers. And as I said, I don't know what his situation is, but you've got Bateman. You've got people on the outside. Likely can be another weapon on the outside, even though he's a tight end. But and now the defense is coming around. Well, what's not to like? And with Pittsburgh, we were just talking about Saturday. What's not to like? You got a half an hour because they're not playing well right now. They're not playing well. They can't score points. You know, I looked at somebody's. I don't know who was it. Somebody's interviewing Arthur Smith, maybe the Bears or something. Went, Arthur Smith, what are you talking about? And they're a descending team, and Russell Wilson's been beaten up. And they're just not who they were midseason. And I thought that game last time, Baltimore delivered a message. You know, you plan to play us in the playoffs. Good luck. I mean, it's not going to be good for you. And so, as I said, I think honestly, you mentioned Philadelphia. I could see a Baltimore Philadelphia Super Bowl very easily because they're complete teams. You know, and every team's got a flaw, but those two are as complete as you're going to find out there. The problem with Philadelphia right now is the quarterback. What's going on with the concussion protocol? I don't know. I mean, I covered quarterback Steve Young who had multiple concussions, and in 3 weeks is a while. I mean, and that was back in the 90s, but he would miss 3 or 4 weeks, but that's because he had multiple concussions. What's going on with Jalen Hurts? Can they win without him? You got Saquon Barkley. I mean, he and Henry are the two best running backs out there. So can you beat teams with defense and Saquon Barkley? I don't know that, but Baltimore has got Lamar and Henry and defense. I do worry a little bit about Tucker, and it's hard for me to say that because he's been so good for so long. I've seen, and you have too. You see every game. Some missed kicks that were automatic for him, and with them, as you know, I mean, I've dealt with specialists over the years, and so have you. It's a mental thing, and if you get in a situation where you're no longer confident as a kicker, you're in trouble.
Clark Judge is here. He will be voting on all things NFL and excuse me, Pro Football Hall of Fame, I should say. He has been on the staff for about 15 years and doing that, previewing the game here. So everybody but Mahomes in Kansas City. We haven't talked about that. I haven't even
Yeah,
asked you, is Josh Allen the MVP or any of that? But it feels like Kansas City just sits out and wait. They make their their discount double checks and their funny commercials and do all of that.
yeah,
And then we try to figure out how everybody's going to beat them. And then they're going to wind up playing, Harbaugh's brother or Houston, probably, although we'll all be big Broncos fans here on Sunday after the Ravens win on Saturday night. But the notion that you're just going to go out to Kansas City and beat them and that's going to be an easy thing because, I mean, I've
yeah.
never heard a
Right.
15-win team be so maligned, Clark.
They haven't scored more than 30 points all year. I'm going to tell you this. This is what I strongly believe, and obviously I'm biased. I think the Chargers, a team I covered years ago, are going to win this weekend, and I want them to win because they can beat Kansas City. They can beat them. They have been very competitive with them in the past. Harbaugh knows how to beat better teams. They don't have weapons to really compete with them, but somehow he'll figure out a way to at least stay there. And if they're there at the end of the game, look out. Quarterback's playing really well right now. Why doesn't Kansas City get more attention? I think because we've seen it so much every year. Mahomes isn't having a particularly great season, but he wins when he has to. I mean, statistically, he hasn't, but he wins when he has to. He's also one of those who's accelerated as we've gotten closer to the finish line here. That's his MO. But they've been somewhat underwhelming this year. And you go down the litany of, you know, just photo finishes, and it's just astounding the good fortune, let's put it that way, that they've had in games down the stretch. The Baltimore game started it. Cincinnati game, when there was a pass interference called on a fourth down, game over. Pass interference, they lose the game. The Bengals do. Then you go to Atlanta. Obvious pass interference in the end zone committed by the Chiefs. They don't call it. They lose the game and they're going in to win. Easy field goal, 32-yarder that the Broncos got. Game's going to it's blocked. The Raiders, easy field goal, 15 seconds. They've snapped the ball and fumbled. The Chiefs get. So at what point do you have more than 9 lives? I mean, at some point you go, my God, what is going on here? I mean, it's just they find ways to win. Good teams find ways to win. Bad teams find ways to lose. They
They've
find
got to
ways to
win
win.
2 games at home and they're in the Super Bowl.
That's it. And that's it. So their worst nightmare is the Chargers. I'm going to tell you that. Their worst night. They don't want to play them. They'd love to play Houston. They'd love to play Houston. They've already played them this year and beat them. They play the Chargers twice, so they go, we've got a pretty good feel about them. I worry about Harbaugh in those big games. He gets his teams ready. As I said, I covered both the Chargers and the 49ers. I knew him in the 49ers. That first year with San Francisco was remarkable what he did. He got them in the conference championship game that they probably should have won. But Eli Manning had, to me, the greatest game of his career. People talk about the Super Bowls. That, to me, was the best game I ever saw Eli Manning. Beaten into submission, just kept coming up, throwing, and they won. I think it was overtime. But he is extraordinary at getting teams to turn around quickly. The Chargers last year, won 5 games? This year they win 11. I mean, he does that everywhere he goes.
Dude, if he
And
comes
so,
in here in a championship game, takes his brother's lunch money, that would be something. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, and that's right. But John's got a history against him, right? John's like, okay, my brother's coming off. They got a way to beat him, and I think they will. I mean, so I think the most talented team is Baltimore. It's the most talented team. Now you got talent doesn't all necessarily translate to winning, but you got to show up in those excuse me in those big games. And Lamar Jackson, to me, just this should be who he is during the regular season. I mean, he's a great player. He's got some things to prove, but he's got to go in here going, listen, I don't have to prove anything. I'm just going to go to the Super Bowl. Forget that 2-4 playoff record. You can talk all you want about it. I'm going to win here. I'm going to win Buffalo. I'm going to win Kansas City. I'm going to do that. So let's see. It's in front of him. They've got the weapons to do it. I think they have the defense to do it. Last year, they could have beaten them in the conference championship game. I'm talking about the Chiefs. They didn't. They have something to prove here. They could have beaten them in the season opener. They didn't. That's again a testimony to the Chiefs, for whatever reason, seem to get there at the end. So this time, do it. Just do it. Let's go out there and be yourself. Do it. Don't fall all over yourself with stupid penalties. Be disciplined. Do it right, and you can get there. You get to New Orleans in a month.
I don't think there's any question people believe that the Ravens are capable. Now, whether they
Yeah.
will or not, we'll find out. Clark Judge is our guest. He called and said, hello, it's me. Right after it's the first time we've been together since I saw Rundgren. So, I mean, I want to take just one detour before I let you go, just on the Rundgren thing. I had seen him do a Bowie thing. He did that new
Yeah.
Cars thing
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
I went up on this beautiful night to the Strand Theater in York, Pennsylvania. I had a beautiful meal with my wife at this place up the street. That one of my great meals of the year. And we went to the show, and I had interviewed Todd, and Todd is
Yeah.
God, as you will point out. And we sat
Yeah.
about the 12th row, and he's doing his thing, and he's doing his whole theatrical thing and the thing. And we left, and we drove home, and my wife got in the car, and my wife doesn't know a lot of Rundgren. She sort of had seen the Daryl Hall's thing in
Yeah.
Hawaii that I talked to him about. She said to me, that was a little weird. And I thought, what's wrong with you? She's never
Yeah.
20 years of our marriage, but she didn't get it. I got it. I had a great night. People love. You know what I loved about it? I loved seeing people that love Todd Rundgren love Todd
Yeah.
Rundgren. That
Well,
was the fun part.
that was a very eclectic tour, and I saw it twice this past year. Same set list, but to me, all you've got to do is hear him do a cappella "Honest Work" for "Honest Work" with two other members of the band, and you think that's as good as it gets. And then "Beloved Infidel" a cappella, got a great voice, and it's a beautiful song, and he's I just think he's in a different category. We talked about first ballot Hall of Famers, right? He would be my first ballot Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, but that's a whole nother thing, which you talked about, when you were mentioning, who's
Yeah,
in and
that's
who's
where I
not.
really want to sit.
Tracy Chapman,
There's no politics at all
no,
involved in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
no,
right?
of course not. No, I mean, so you mentioned we don't have Jethro Tull in there, but we have Dolly Parton. I mean, what Rock and Roll
Dude, I
Hall of
saw
Fame?
Janet Jackson get inducted the
Yeah,
night I was
oh,
at the Barclays Center, and I saw The Cure blow my mind that night,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
Robert Smith and the Cure, but Janet Jackson got in the year that Rundgren was a first time finalist, and he didn't get in. When Janet Jackson's in and Todd's not, and that's when he said, "Forget it.
but
I
like
don't want."
Styx isn't considered. I'm thinking, what's the 100 million albums in the 50 years of doing this, and like what?
Joe Cocker is not in. Joe Cocker. I mean, come on.
Man.
And so I mean, it's a music Hall
So
of Fame.
you being a voter for the Pro Football Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
you're pissed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're both pissed at the Baseball Hall of Fame, right?
Well,
Pete
yeah,
Rose died and they still didn't put him in, and they're doing it all in front of gambling ads.
yeah, and Harold Baines is in. I mean, so, but
Maryland or Harold Payne, nice guy, and the Hall
oh,
of
a
Fame
nice guy,
too.
but the thing is, what Rundgren said, which I sort of agree with. He goes, "Listen, I don't believe in Hall of Fames. First of all, and secondly, I mean, you should be dead to be in a Hall of Fame. Why are we honoring people who are still out there?" And he said, "I don't care." And at least he was true to himself, because when he didn't get in, he said, "I don't care about it, but this was about my fans, because you have to remember you support them, and I voted every day, voted." And so he's the third highest vote getter. So you go, if he's the third highest, people want him in. And Janet Jackson got in and others, and he didn't. So he said, "I give up on it. I'm not doing it." So he got voted in a couple of years later. And he said, "Fine, I'm not going." And he didn't. He did not go. Patty
Can I
Smith
give
was,
you a really sad story? Because I've told this one time. The night that Janet Jackson got in, I went with my friend Julio Bermejo from San Francisco, and he was in Brooklyn, and he called me. He's like, "You want to come up to New York? Go to the Hall of Fame?" Sure. Def Leppard got in. It was the worst ensemble ever. Go Google how awful and off key them doing All the Young Dudes was at the end. It was terrible. So it was an interesting night. Stevie Nicks did Leather and Lace with Don
hmm
Henley and stuff.
hmm
I'm on the sort of terrace level 20-yard line, other end of the hockey rink. I got a $100 ticket
Yeah,
downstairs.
right.
It was 12. It was all night long. The thing went all night. It's made for all the drunk people down in the front on the tables, right? There was a woman who came with her 8-year-old boy, and he was very antsy. I mean, this was a not a thing you want a kid in a seat in a hockey arena, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All night long, they were only there to see Janet Jackson. She was a Janet Jackson super fan. They were all Janet Jackson, everything about them. They were at this thing, sitting through The Cure, sitting through Janet Jackson. They thought she was going to sing.
Hmm.
She kept saying to me, when Janet sings, like Janet Jackson came out, she looked a little puffy. She didn't look good. She came out and she did a little, thank you. I'd like to thank all my fans. Thank you. Good night. She walked off the stage. This woman had waited with her kid for hours thinking that Janet Jackson was going to sing
Hmm.
and didn't. And so that night I'm thinking, same as you. I'm like, what are they doing putting Janet Jackson? At least I'll say this for you. And you just made a Harold Baines joke, and that's cool because he probably is not a baseball fan. You
He
guys
was a
never
good
put
player. He was a
anybody
good
in that.
player.
You guys
He was a
never
good
put
player.
anybody in that shouldn't be in,
Yo, sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
at a different level when we're
No.
giving Hollywood stars the,
Yeah, that's right.
the people that don't deserve it. That's
I
all.
don't want to be specific, but I'd say in the last 6 years I could name you two or three. But yeah, Harold Baines was a really good player. I'm not trying to denigrate him. He was a really good player, but when Hall of Fame, you go, that's a different level. And that's what I think people don't understand when they talk about, this guy's the first ballot Hall of Fame. He's going to the Hall of Fame. As I said, I probably mentioned to you before, I remember a telecast years ago. It was a Monday night game, and Stephen Gostkowski was kicking then for the Tennessee Titans, I think, and he made a long field goal. And ESPN was doing the game, and I've forgotten who the announcer was, but he said Stephen Gostkowski, who someday will be in the Hall of Fame and maybe as a first ballot Hall of Famer. And my jaw dropped, and I actually wrote about it because I went, wait, we at that time we'd had two specialists in, and I said, hey, Stephen Gostkowski. I mean, we've got Ray Guy and we've got Jan Stenroot at that point. As I said, it was later that we had Morton Anderson, but when Stephen, he's not going in, period. And first ballot Hall of Famer.
Well, I mean, just to pull football together this week, as an example, I'm close with the guys in sticks. I don't
Yeah,
think they really care whether they get in or not. I know Dennis. I had Lawrence Gowan on the show this year, right when I had Todd Rundgren on. And the Renegade thing
yeah,
has
in
become a
Pittsburgh.
part of their thing in Pittsburgh. When I think of sticks, and I think it's like Todd Rundgren, I talked to Todd Rundgren for 40 minutes. He gave me 20 and spent 40. He loved talking to me. He refused to put the camera on, but once we got going, and I talked to him about almost everything but him.
Yeah.
About his career because he's touched everybody else's career, producing Meatloaf, just down the line of all the things he's ever done.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm
Oh,
thinking to myself, people like Desmond Child, who wrote all of these songs, and these songwriters and different people that don't even, not even their own work, but with like Sticks would be like, if I'm in the room with Jan Wenner, I'm like, come sail away, babe, 100 million
yeah,
albums sold,
yeah,
50 years of doing this. Stop, sit down. They're in. Put them.
yeah.
There
Well,
can be no argument on certain people, and at
that's
least
right.
you guys aren't. You didn't make an ass out of Terrell Owens, even if he made an ass of himself. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. But I mean, for your listeners, if they watch Green Bay games in Lambeau, when they score, what do they play? Bang on the Drum All Day by Todd Rundgren.
They do. See that? And I don't know if the Packers are going to win or not. Clark, I'm going to let
No.
you go. We'll compare Burt Jones notes next
Yeah,
time. I have just gone into this rabbit hole with these 1971 NFL belt buckles because I'm a belt buckle guy and you
yeah,
can
those are
wear
good.
them and they're fun. Dude, I look down my wall, St. Louis Cardinals, and then I see Oakland Raiders. I see Washington all these teams that they don't even have the same name anymore. But then I look up and I see Los Angeles Rams, and I'm like, oh, they came back.
Yeah,
What's
that's
all to
right.
do is get, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I should have worn my Baltimore Colts hat. I got a Baltimore Colts hat, sweatshirt, and T-shirt.
I see Rams Vikings, and all I see is like Bloomington and Staubach and Fran Tarkenton in my childhood, including like a weird thing with officials in that game. Clark
Yeah.
Judge is here. He is a legend, and he knows that I know a little bit about football because I drop Babe Laufenberg references and, like things like that.
You pay well.
Hey, it is a Hall of Fame week. We have a Hall of Fame matchup. Steelers, Ravens. Wouldn't want it any other way from my Earl Campbell jersey because my fancy schmancy Derrick Henry, King Henry Oilers
I
jersey is
like it.
arriving in the mail. It's coming this week. I got a 22. And anybody ask him, like, he's going to the Hall of Fame. I'm Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. Happy New Year to everybody. What are you doing? You hold that
I'm,
up
I'm,
again. Say
Go ahead.
something.
That's go Habs go. That's for the Montreal Canadiens. You and I
Ovechkin.
talk. You and I
Ovechkin's going
talk.
to score. He's going to get the record.
You and I talk hockey all the time, so I just throw that on you to tell you that I haven't forgotten about hockey. That's another conversation for another day.
Well, it's interesting that you would bring that up because on January the 6th, I tweeted out and Facebooked out all of the newspaper frontages of the insurrection, and
Yes.
I quoted the great Quebec license plate, Jamie Sauvien. That's it. I'm dropping the mic. We're Baltimore positive, and I do remember.